Welcome to Fading Memories, a podcast with advice, wisdom, and hope from caregivers who have lived the experience and survived to tell the tale. Think of us as your caregiver best friend. Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. I'm your host, Jen Fink, back with you guys again. With me today, my brain is going to work, is Karen Murdoch. She is with Voiced Memories, and I'm going to let her explain it so I don't butcher it. So thanks for joining me, Karen.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm so excited to be here and talk about two things that I'm so passionate about, and that's like photos and helping those that have dementia and their caregivers. So thanks for the invite.
Oh, you're welcome. So for those listeners that may not have been around that long, I am a retired portrait photographer. So I literally have a closet full of old family photos. And I don't even know how many are in my Dropbox folder. I don't think I want to count. So I'm also very passionate about photos. And because my mom had Alzheimer's and my maternal grandmother had vascular dementia, there is there's no captions, no IDs on probably 98% of these photos. So there's a lot of lost memories in that closet. So I try to do better so that anybody coming after me can be like, oh, this is who these people are. And I have a quick funny story. So when we had our 1 hour photo lab and our portrait studio, we did photo restorations, which I think you do as well, correct?
Yes, we do.
So you probably have had something similar. This client brought in a very old album from the early 1900s. It included images of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. I have to make sure to clarify which one that is because not everybody's from California. And there was all these cool pictures. They were captioned, names, everything. And then there was one, basically a selfie, that was captioned, "Me, of course." Nobody knew who the heck "Me, of course" was. I mean, it's so, you look at it, it's you. So like, it feels weird to be like, oh, this is Karen or this is Jennifer. And nobody had a clue who "Me, of course" was. So maybe someday I'll meet "Me, of course" in the afterlife and be like, next time capture your photos better.
That's so common, isn't it, Jennifer, that people do that? It's often we're going through photos and we see this, mom and dad and me. Yeah. And, at some point that doesn't help an awful lot.
No, especially, 3 generations down, because I've got pictures. I know they're related to one side of the family or the other, but that's about it. And you could kind of guess based on clothing what era they might be from. But beyond that, it's like, and I have one uncle left on my dad's side, a couple of an aunt and an uncle on my mom's side. So it's like, really should just send them all the link to the Dropbox folder and like, please ID any of these people you might know.
Oh, I totally understand that. And that's one of the reasons why I got into doing photo management, photo organizing, it's sometimes called, is to help people with those collections. Because, for example, myself, my mom inherited her parents' photo collection, and then she passed away, and now I've inherited that photo collection. Plus, I've got my own, and my dad just had a few photos. He didn't have a lot in his personal collection that he got from his mom. And then I've got to get all that ready, so I'm giving the best photos and the best family stories to my daughter, right? And and it's not as easy as it sounds, especially as a photographer. You must have hundreds, thousands of photos in your own collection, never mind those of your clients and all that you've got to make sure are divided out.
Yep. So right? Early 2016, so I have one daughter. And we had scrapbooks and photo albums and pictures here. It was like, essentially things were scattered across the house in different cupboards and closets and stuff. And I'm like, I'm getting these organized. And it took like, I had the whole big dining room table. We had 2, thankfully. And it was covered. And I finally, when I was growing up, we had a black miniature poodle named Daphne. absolutely loved to chase party balloons. We had more pictures of that dog with the chasing balloons at people's birthdays, including the ones that were 5 inches square from the larger format negatives, which that's probably not something too many people are familiar with. And I got to the point, I'm like, I have one daughter. How many freaking pictures of this dog does she need? So I picked out like the best two or three, tossed the rest. I'm like we've had plenty of dogs in our life. We don't need 50 pictures of this dog chasing balloons. And I narrowed everything down. I got it all organized. I captioned it all. And I had like about a half-inch stack of photos of my daughter at some school event at something around 10 to 12, probably closer to 10, but I wasn't really sure. At one point, she went to like a different school. We moved a couple times and she ended up different school districts. I had no, and they all sort of look the same, especially when there's no signage. And I had no clue. I'm like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what school it was. And I asked my husband, he's like, I don't know. I asked her, she's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, pachunk, into the trash. Like, if she doesn't remember him now, and she was 2016, she was, well, I can't do math that well. She was 23 at the time.
Right.
And I'm like, if you're not going to remember at 23, you ain't going to remember at 33. So, like,
Exactly. And I always say that my world kind of collided with my friend who has dementia, because it was like, boom, I was able to use my photo skills to work with her, because I suddenly became a power of attorney, an agent for all of her medical decisions. And just before COVID happened, it was crazy. The doctors kept telling us, oh, there's something happening here. We think it's anxiety. We think it's depression. We were going to doctor's appointments and everything. But I was having to go to her home because she lived alone every day. Something new would happen every day that I would have to go. Finally, we got her diagnosed appropriately, and she had to go just from her home immediately to what we have here is a locked environment for those who might wander. And so she ended up quickly kind of bypassed, independent, assisted, and boom, landed right there. And I got tasked with having to empty the home.
Ooh, that's bad enough to do with your own family.
Right? And this girl, bless her heart, she had saved everything. She had the jewelry from when she was a little girl. She had all the family photos, of course, all this memorabilia that meant so much to her. And she was starting to lose some of the memories at that point about, well, where did they come from? She knew who people were at that point. And so that kind of got me really starting to look into and research to find out more, because I'm one of those people, I got to know the why behind things, right?
Yeah, me too.
So I started looking, and it was so interesting because I found out what you were describing earlier is a perfect example of natural memory loss when we're aging, right? We all have it. It gets a little bit more pronounced when we hit 50 or 60. Some of us, it takes till we're 70 before it kicks in, but it does. And so how much better is it if you can be making sure that those memories are safeguarded with the story behind those important photos, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I never knew there was such a thing as mild cognitive impairment. That was one that kind of, okay, what's this all about? And these are the people, that often end up living at home. They can function quite well still in their home. And I think voiced memories can help them probably the most, right? Because they can use it as a life review, a reminiscence therapy tool. And then there's those with full dementia at the early stages. Janice has, it's called Lewy body dementia. And so she's got very limited movements at this point in her journey. She's quite advanced. She spends all day in a Broda chair. For those who don't know what a Broda chair is, it's kind of, I just say it's like a fancy, more expensive wheelchair, but it allows her to recline and be comfortable and not get the sores developing maybe as readily. So as we were doing the emptying of the home, I think she had about 24 to 30 photo albums in her home. And some of them, exactly like you were saying, she was a cat girl. And there was like albums that were just devoted to one cat.
Oh my.
right? So
I'm
it
not
was
that
like,
bad.
okay, right? So it was like, okay, I think we can narrow this down to a, a picture or two of a cat. So we started doing some curating on her photos as I continued to research and look for solutions to kind of help reach her as her diagnosis was getting worse. And that's where voice memories came from, that it was the foundation for that. Helping others, those who have dementia, to recall the story. So I tried with her doing a life review therapy session. I went and got one of her cousins. She has a cousin who's quite a bit older, and she doesn't go visit her because she says, why? She just sits in the chair. Somebody has to go with me when I go visit her. Well, if somebody else goes with you, guess what? You're probably not going to be actually visiting with Janice. You're going to be visiting with the person that's accompanied you, right?
Yeah.
So what's the point in that? So I went to this cousin's home and I got her to record some stories. She's 85, this cousin. So all she remembered was this was our trip to the Grand Canyon. So I had like 5 photos. They were probably, I'm going to say the ladies were probably in their 50s and 60s when they went on this trip. And when I showed them to Janice and she listened to her cousin Millie talking, there wasn't a lot of interest. And I have to say, I was really disappointed. So I thought, okay, she seems to be disinterested. So let me go back and do some further research. And I found out that the best results come when you're doing it from when they were about 11 years old till 30 years old. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I had no knowledge of that. And so I thought, that makes sense if you think about it, because you're looking at, that's the time when often we're hitting our teenage years, and there's certainly lots of things to
Yeah.
remember from that time frame, isn't there?
Or maybe there's more to forget too.
Yes, there certainly is, isn't there? But you get engaged, you get your first job, all these things are happening in your life. Maybe you have children during that time frame. For Janice, she never married, she never had children. So that wasn't the case, but she traveled a lot. She was very close to her mom and brother, having lost her dad when she was only 7 years old. So I recorded the stories and made comments, like, this is in the kitchen in the house in Forest Heights that you had. And I said, look at your brother, how long his hair is and everything. And she was actually, when we were going through those photos, she was paying attention. And I was just so thrilled. And so we finished going through them, and she took my hand and she pulled it closer to her and she smiled. And I started to get emotional and teary. And you could tell she was surprised at my reaction. That little, whoa, I didn't mean to make you cry kind of look. And I was thrilled because obviously I had hit something at that point with her. So now I'm looking at kind of taking it to the next stage, going to be doing more albums for her in the Voice Memories app that we can review with her. And if I'm not there, the caregiver that we've hired, her companion, can play the album for her and she can still hear my voice. So, and the research has shown that using multiple senses is the best. So she's hearing the audio, she's visually seeing the photos. If somebody can figure out a way to bring scent into it, I would love it. But at this point, I don't know how we would do that. But I can touch her arm when it's happening, that kind of thing, just to get her more engaged, because that is definitely the hardest thing when we're in the dementia, is as advanced as hers is. But I couldn't help but think how this could help people that are just at the mild cognitive impairment level, or those in the early stages of their dementia, to be going through these, reviewing them, telling stories, and then you're making memories while you're sharing memories, right? Because you can record it and then send it off to a family member to look at when you're done. Or they can look at it and they can maybe even be able to tell if the dementia is progressing, because the stories are not correct, or the people are not as identified correctly as they were previously. And then at the very last stage, when that person does pass on, you're going to actually have a little bit of a family history left behind to complete it, right? So for you to carry on and have to share. So I've started doing a little bit of voice memory albums for myself when I have time. And I'm concentrating mostly this year on the events that I'm attending. So I'm able to put in the dates they happened, what the event was called. I go to a lot of galas and that, so I can put in the name of the gala before it's gone, like, who gala with? What was it in support of, right? So that when I look back at it, those details will be there instead of, this is me, Cash.
Yeah, me, of course.
Right? And so it's about making sure that, those details are captured and the emotions. I recorded one story that involved a picture of my dad, and I couldn't believe how emotional I got when I was doing that. I was just like, oh my gosh, my dad, because we were as thick as thieves, my mother used to say. And it was so great to feel that and release those emotions that I was feeling as I looked at that picture. So I really think it's a wonderful way to start helping people. And I also believe, that these two worlds of mine collided for a reason. Right?
My mom always said everything happens for a reason. She would say that so often. You'd be working really hard toward a goal, and then the goal would just like be obliterated, and you'd be like, and she's like, everything happens for a reason. You're like, there was times she said that you just like wanted to like mentally, you're like, I'd really like to punch you right now. Never did, but so frustrating. But I think with voiced memories, like, the end of my dad's life was really difficult. He had kidney failure. It was putting toxins in his system that affected his memory. And there was, this was in 2016. We were on different sides of the political teams. And oh my God, dealing with him during that 2016 election was awful. And then he was in the hospital for 32 days. And then he was home on hospice. And he was just a pain in the butt. Another funny story. I don't know if I think I've told this on the show. I must have said this on the show before, but for people who haven't heard it recently, my sister understandably wanted to keep him taking his insulin because, when your blood sugar is out of whack, you're not a very nice person. You don't feel good, The caregivers were not allowed to inject him, so they had to kind of talk him through it. And this one particular day, he just wasn't having it. And the caregiver probably should have just said, since I was there and my husband was there, he's just not having it. I think we should just not worry about it today or not worry about it right now. Right. That was probably the best answer, but they don't get enough dementia training. I was still trying to figure out everything. It was like, because you're, of course, thrown in the deep end with sharks. It was a very lovely time. And I went in, he was yelling at her. I was trying to diffuse the situation. He got really nasty, and so I didn't say something I would regret. I went in the kitchen. My husband and I had heads together, and we were talking, and literally my mom sticks her face in between our two heads, and she goes, "He's being such a jerk. Feel free to go in there and tell him to drop dead." It's like, oh my God. It was like the most inappropriate statement, but it is so funny all at the same time. Because the poor guy was on hospice. But it was just, and so it's very hard to remember before that, I remember good times with him, but then I remember him, being really grumpy with mom and not having patience with her, and that would frustrate me. And, just like, oh, so it'd be really nice to have something where I could be like, oh, this is, this event. We were all in Rotary together. I think 2025's Rotary International Convention is in Calgary, so not too far from you, not close by, but
2-hour drive.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a little closer than Sacramento, California. And it'd be nice to be like, oh, here's when he got my husband to join Rotary. He kept trying to get one of the 4 kids, either my sister and I or one of the 2 son-in-laws, to join Rotary. So my husband decides I'm going to join, and he just shows up. And for those people who aren't aware, you're supposed to be sponsored. You're supposed to have somebody bring you and introduce you. And there's like a whole little protocol. And my husband just blew that out of the water. And they're like, where'd this guy come from? Like, who's this sponsor? And it's like, well, this other guy in this other club over here, this other, it was so funny. And I need to find some photos of the two of them at a meeting and record that, because it was really funny because it just went outside all of the norms.
Absolutely.
Is totally not my husband's way of doing anything either. I'm the one that goes outside the box.
Right.
That man loves to live in the box. But I did have a suggestion, because you were talking about if you could add in like smell-o-vision, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And I've been taking on like the Alzheimer's Association. I don't know if it's just the California, Nevada chapter, or if it's the whole country. I can't remember. I do too many things with those people. But they're doing online trainings, 3 different classes on how to incorporate your storytelling into your legislative advocacy. And one of the things they talk about is including sensory details in your story. Like this would not be in a story about that you would tell a legislator, but you could be I was thinking about the Grand Canyon. You could talk about how warm it is, maybe how the pine trees smell. I was just there in 2022. So, you can kind of give them the audio clues for the sensory, like the heat on your face and the smell of the pine trees, maybe burn a pine scented candle, though I think those are gross.
That's a great idea, even though they are a little gross.
Yeah.
I agree. But that's the thing, you want to engage all those senses, like I had been thinking, of doing some fresh baking and taking it with me. So the smell of the baking but you're right. Candles come in all sorts of different aromas these days. You can incorporate that, because I have on my website, I list a bunch of different research that's been done. Like the reminiscence therapy is not new. It's just the way we do it with the recording embedded into that particular photo that's new. But it's been shown to enhance their emotional well-being, especially if it takes you back to a really good, happy moment in time. Like we know ourselves how we feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're looking at a photo that just brings back great memories. And it actually can improve cognitive function. It helps them to maintain cognitive function a little longer. And that makes sense. It's kind of like you're studying in your book when you're in school, right? You're going over it over and over again. So it can help strengthen it that way. But it also can help strengthen those social connections, like getting the younger people to have something to do when they come visit, and I always say don't do too many photos at a time. Maybe 3 in one day with somebody with dementia is plenty. Record, if they can record 3 stories, 3 photos, they might need some help with different things depending on where they are. But to be able to upload the photo, maybe it's pretty easy, but they may need somebody to do the scanning of the photo for them. And there are lots of businesses, lots of photo managers across the country that can help with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's lots, and I think it would help with your personal identity, right? Because I think there's times in our lives where we feel like we're losing our personal identity. Like I've worked with people who've just gone through divorces and they feel like who am I now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can only imagine how it must feel when you know that your memories aren't all there. Something's happening. So just to reinforce to yourself that you are still you at the best, right?
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's lots of things that we can look at to help those that we love, those we care about that have dementia. And this was something that I thought I could do. So
Well, it definitely sounds awesome to me. So I'm going to highlight something that you said in case people didn't quite catch it. So the research that you found says that people seem to have, I would say, the richest storage of memories from ages 11 to 30. When
That's
I
right.
first started visiting with my mom, I have a scrapbook that my sister made of the two of us. Now, I'm blonde hair, fair skin. She's chocolate brown eyes, brown hair, olive complexion. Like I tell people, you would not know we were related even if we were sitting in front of you. And my mom did not recognize either one of these two. And I'm like, well, you've got a blonde daughter and a brunette daughter, right? Could these be your daughters? I mean, it was just going right over her head. And every time I'd ask a question to try to bring out any memories, and I just was met with like basically the verbal equivalent of a dull thud, it was painful. And I'm like, I am never doing this again. And that's when I started doing a lot of my own research, trying to figure out, like, how do I engage with this woman who literally wants to sit around and shoot the breeze? Like, it's kind of hard to shoot the breeze with somebody who says the same thing every 3 minutes. Like
Exactly.
after like 10 or 15 minutes, I want to like bang my head on the wall, which is not good for your brain. So let's not do that. So I really wish I'd known back in 2017 that that's where the store, and I think about it, she was in high school. Well, not from 11, but high school. She met my dad. They got married. Obviously, let's see, how old was she when my sister was born? I think she was 28, 28, 29. So yeah, both the kids were born in that time frame, or at least pretty close. They bought two different houses. We went camping. We had a trailer that they loaned to my paternal grandparents, and it caught fire on the road. Just how we upgraded. It's like I could have brought out all those stories. Like we have a picture of the melted, burnt up trailer, which is kind of, it's kind of interesting. Think of an aluminum can melted and burned. It's not the prettiest sight, but it was interesting. Let's see what else happened between 11 and 30. Well, her brothers got married. I think no, not yeah, her brothers got married. Yeah, there's just this huge amount of life history that happened between 11 and 30 that I didn't attempt to tap into because it wasn't my history, not much of it anyway.
And I think that's it. We have a tendency to go where we're familiar, right?
Which is fair.
Right? And I had a recreational therapist who is a friend of mine, and she was explaining to me that a memory, to think of it as a bookshelf. And if you shake that bookshelf, they're falling off the top shelves first. And it's the lower books that are staying on the shelf. And that's what their memories are like.
That's an excellent analogy.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And that just made so much sense to me. And then when you think, like, for most people that are having normal memory loss as they're aging, how many of us have great memories before we were, say, 10? We maybe have a few here and there. That's about it. But so much happens between about 11 and 30. It's crazy. So it made sense to me. So that's why I refocused on looking at her photo books and going, okay, this is the ones we're going to draw from. And it seems to be working more successfully. And it would be great if you're just in the mild cognitive impairment is where you have, or you have early stage dementia, the early parts of it, to be able to do your own stories from that time frame. I think that would be incredible. And then you can share those with loved ones, because we all know a lot of people have a difficult time going to visit when somebody is having a mental decline. So this would, give them something to engage you with when they do come, or you could, our particular system you can send an email that they can access that album only for 24 hours. That way they can listen to your stories and see the photos as well. And it's great. I did one. It was a family reunion, and I sent it to my daughter and my niece and my brother. And my brother said, "Hey, that's great." My daughter and my niece came back and said, "You have the wrong year." And they were able to zoom in to why I had it wrong. I still have that shirt, my daughter said. My niece said, no, I moved back from BC the year before. So they had the solution. So it kind of gave us something to talk about and unite, even though my niece, my daughter, and my brother are all in Manitoba, which is 2 provinces away from me. So,
well, and it's it enhances the story a little bit. Oh, you thought it was X year, and they're saying no, it's Y year, and this is why it's Y year. This is how we know it's Y year, and it just I think that adds to the memories because
Exactly.
you're retelling it now because it's interesting.
Right. And it's like when my dad was passing away, and he was 90 years old at the time. And my brothers and I were kind of going through photos, and we found one, and it was like, I don't know who any of these people are. Are we even going to keep this one? It's something, I don't know what, made me run over to the nursing home, which was literally across the field. It was with my brother lives in the country. And we went there, and I said, Dad, who's in this photo? And he pointed to himself in the front row. He said, I'm the kid that's sitting down with one knee bent. And then he went in to point out others. The one I remember the most was him pointing out the gentleman who was my school bus driver growing up. And then he told about the story of the hotel being built in town, and how the kids would go over there after school looking for work because it was the Depression and they were hoping to get money to bring home. So we had an entire afternoon spent reminiscing just weeks before he passed away over a photo I almost threw out.
Well, thankfully he remembered.
Yeah, but he remembered. He did a great job at capturing the story, and it was fabulous. So now I have two memories. I have the memory that Dad and I shared a great afternoon, and I have the story behind his photo. One of the very few photos. Up until that point, I only had a photo of him at 17 as the earliest photo. So it was magnificent to me to have that moment. And I think we can use our photos. And obviously, as a former photographer, you understand that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. How old was he in that photo?
He was about 11. He said he was 11, funny enough. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, I'm kind of wondering if it fell into that, that big memory bank of memory, stored memories. Interestingly enough, and I don't know exactly how this relates, but I think, I'm sure all of us, especially those of us that are a little past 30, wonder like, why the heck does time just seem to fly by? And I always assumed it was because, a year is a much smaller percentage of our life than when we were 10 or 5, which is true. One of the reasons life seems to fly by as we age is because the percentage of time is shorter. But more importantly is that, we're adults with busy lives and responsibilities. And, how much of your everyday is the same as like, today's Monday. So is today fairly similar to last Monday and maybe the previous Monday? So we don't have a lot of like historical markers every day or even every week to demarcate like, this is August of 2024 and this happened. Of course, I'm in the United States and a whole ton of crap happened in July. Just like, okay, please turn off the fire hose of future history questions because I'm over that. It's just like, you remember like I got sick and lost my voice the weekend that Biden dropped out of the race. And there have been a whole lot of things that happened right before and right after. And it's just been like, whew. But I remember, my husband, we have a full bathroom downstairs and I was trying to stay away from him so I didn't get sick, which that didn't work. And he came downstairs and said, Biden dropped out. And I'm like, huh? Which was the first clue that I wasn't feeling well. I was like, wasn't paying attention. So I know exactly when he dropped out and when I got sick because they're tied together. But had that not been the case, like some historical thing happening, I probably would be like, I'd probably have to go back through like, when was the doctor's appointment? Because I got sick before. I'd have to like retrace my history. So that's why time flies faster as we're aging, because every day is not that much different than all the days before it. So try to do something unique each week.
There you go. I love that. That's great advice. And I never thought of that. I've often wondered, like, why does it seem that life seems to speed up as we're aging? But that does make sense, right? We don't have those markers to work as our memory markers anymore, right?
Yeah, when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because just it being a percentage of your life didn't quite feel like the full answer. So I feel like that must be why ages 11 to 30 are like where their memories are the richest. I mean, ours probably are too if we step back and think about like all the things we went through from 11 to 30. And I just think it's, I just love, like I've said a lot, if I was half my age, had twice the science aptitude, I'd go into brain research because I just find it so fascinating. But
Yeah.
I'm an artist. Science is not my thing. So I can, whenever I talk to doctors or researchers, we always do like a pre-call, and I always have to be like, okay, I'm not a stupid person. I am very well read. This is obviously my topic, but you're going to have to keep it pretty basic. And they do pretty good. And if they don't, I can usually be like, halt, can you explain that? Because, sometimes they use acronyms or terminology. Like my neuropsychologist friend who I recorded with yesterday, he has a tendency to use like business words, neuropsychology words, and he's good at 99% of the time, like defining them. Not always, but which is pretty tough when you're, even as a photographer, there's phrases that we use that aren't necessarily household phrases. So it's really, brains are so fascinating.
I have to agree with you. And it's so true. Like when I look at photos, I'll be going through them, and all of a sudden it's like something I completely forgot about. I'll see that photo and it's like, oh my gosh, yes, I remember that. And then I can go on and talk about it for 5 minutes, right?
I just actually had that experience the other night. We have a 20 by 30-inch print of an old barn. In the foreground is a beautiful California native oak tree, dirt road up to it. And the colors all work perfect for the TV room in my house. And my husband looked at it and he goes, isn't that such and such ranch in Walnut Creek, which is closer to San Francisco than most people would be aware of? It's a suburb of the city, kind of far-flung suburb. And I said, no, that's in like the Napa area. And he looked at me with the whole, oh, your brain ain't working so good. And so I'm like, no, that was the second time we escaped the county. Escaped the county during the COVID lockdowns. The first time we went to in the Sacramento Delta area, and the second time we went up there. And he just looked at me like, no, you're confused. And I remembered that it was likely June of 2020, because I remember when the first like escape trip happened. And so I'm going through my phone, and it took like too many photos on my phone, but I scrolled back and I'm like, right there, it's such and such. I can't pronounce the name of this ranch, and it's in Napa County. It didn't say the city. I probably could find it if I Googled it, but it was like, that's really cool. Like it's a really interesting photo, but it's a generic enough that you could assume that it's some farm, barn someplace. You probably have similar scenery up where you're at, although I don't know if you have oak trees like we do. Haven't been to Alberta, so I have to make that a stop. But I remembered it because it was like, that's like, we got in the car with the dogs and just got the heck out of Dodge because we were looking a little tired of looking at the same walls. So we just had to, even though there was restaurants weren't open and all that stuff, although some of them were open if you sat outside. And we actually sat inside a restaurant, I think it was May of 2020. And I remember thinking, this is scary. Like, I don't know that I want to sit inside right now. So it's like you have these vivid memories because it's tied to a historical time frame. Not that the picture is that unique.
Yeah, but that's true. Very true. Like I'll never forget when COVID hit here in Canada, and the lockdowns and everything began. That Friday, two of the girls were in the office with me, and I said, you know what? Let's just take next week off. We'll just close for a week. And I remembered the day saying that to them because I was going out that night with my husband. It was his birthday, March 13th. And little did I know it would be a much longer time before the doors opened again.
Yup. It'll be interesting, 20 or so years from now. That's a scary number. And looking back, just now, you look back and you think, oh, you kind of shudder like, oh, that wasn't such a great time. And we could see that, keeping the kids out of school was bad. And, everybody made the decisions with the information they had. It's like, hindsight's 2020. We now know what we should have done, but not the heck we were doing then. But it'll be interesting to see, like my paternal grandmother was born in 1918. So she technically lived through 2 pandemics.
Wow.
She died in 21. Yeah,
Wow.
I remember thinking every time I visited her during the pandemic, I remember thinking, because I was grateful, one, that the board and care home she was in allowed us in. They preferred that you wore masks. I always sat on the deck with her, which was really nice. That way we didn't have to wear masks because that was annoying. And, but I was just grateful that they let us in. They could have said, nope, nobody in. And, I recorded some stories from her. I'll have to attach those to some photos. That'll be cool. I'm gonna have to. Is that something we can do with the app if I have a recording?
Yes, you can upload it. Your
cool.
recording. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We're gonna have to download that app when we're done because I got all these ideas. But yeah, my dad went to Africa with an eye doctor one year, and then the same eye doctor and a dentist the next year to do cataract surgeries and dental surgeries. And in between the 2 trips, they had to ship the dental equipment to Zambia, Africa, which is on the west-ish coast. Not quite on the coast, but it's on the west side of, like, northwest part of Africa. And the freight, what do they call those? The boxes. What do they call those things? Anyway, shipping container. Thank you. There's a little voice in the hallway there. It was one price, full, not full. It wasn't like they waited or anything, which I thought was interesting. And so they decided they would turn the shipping container into a village library. My paternal grandmother was a librarian in her, younger adulthood. And so, and this is my favorite story. She tells me the story about collecting books to send to Africa. And literally, she went to all the yard sales, the Friends of the Library sales, the thrift stores. If you were sitting at the bus stop and you closed a book and tried to put it in your book bag, she'd be like, I need that book for Africa. Because they only had a very short period of time to fill the container and ship it because, it's not like overnight FedEx. It takes a little time for things to get from Northern California to Africa.
My gosh.
So I asked her about that story. And she said, well, they named the library after your father. And I'm like, oh, yeah, cute. I'm in my head, I'm thinking, oh, that's kind of a nice quote memory. And then I later, after she died, I found out that's actually true. So I have pictures of the library. They expanded it another year. And then I have heard, I think it's about a 10-minute talk that she gave me.
Wow. That's so awesome. It's such a great way to share your history. Like, haven't we been sharing oral histories for generations? Right? Yep. So what a great way to do that. I love that.
Definitely. So what is the website address so people can hop off this listening?
They can go to voicedmemories.ca or
CA
they can
as in Canada.
That's right. Or photocollections.ca. You can access it there as well. And you can see all the research has been documented and the blogging is done on photocollections.ca. But the software as a service platform is actually voicedmemories.ca.
Awesome. Well, as everybody should know, that'll be linked in the show notes so that you don't have to remember it. Because I know sometimes that stuff's hard to remember, especially those of us in the States. .ca, huh? We seem to have enough of those extensions these days that it's not quite as different as it used to be. Yeah. I'm still kind of a .com.org girl.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm old school in that respect. But this has been so much fun. It's like, I've been reminiscing while we've been talking about reminiscence therapy with photos and voiced memories. This has been cool.
That's awesome. So I'm hoping you're feeling good now that you've done some reminiscing.
Yeah, no, definitely a nice way to have a Monday afternoon.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Fading Memories is also available wherever you get your podcasts.